My brother changed the locks on the only home I had left before the funeral flowers had even started to wilt. That should tell you everything you need to know about Marcus Mercer. 3 weeks ago, I came home from a 12-hour shift at Maplewood Senior Living, wearing the same tired blue scrubs I had worn through 2 years of my mother's cancer treatments. And my key would not turn in the front door. At first, I thought I was just exhausted. Grief has a funny way of making simple things feel impossible. I stood there on the porch. The porch my father built with his own hands when I was 8 years old, trying the key again and again like maybe the door had suddenly developed an attitude. But the lock was new. So was the deadbolt. I stepped back and looked at the house. The same white colonial in the Connecticut suburbs where I learned to ride a bike, where my mother grew lavender in the backyard, where I had spent the last 2 years making oatmeal, changing sheets, counting pills, and pretending I was not scared every time Mom got quiet after chemotherapy. And now I could not get inside. I walked around to the garage, my heart already sinking before I saw the boxes. Everything I owned had been thrown onto the lawn. Not packed, not moved carefully, thrown. My clothes were stuffed into cardboard boxes like garbage. My books were bent and spilling out. My nursing school diploma, the one I paid for with scholarships and double shifts at a diner, was soaked from the afternoon rain. A framed photo of Mom and me at my graduation lay face down in the wet grass. I picked it up with hands that did not feel like mine. Through the living room window, I saw my sister-in-law, Victoria, walking across the floor with a glass of white wine in her hand. She was wearing cream-colored silk. Because of course she was. Victoria never entered a room unless she looked like she was being photographed for a magazine nobody asked to read. She saw me. She smiled. Then she lifted her glass in a tiny little toast. As if I were some poor neighbor whose misfortune had improved her evening. That was the moment something inside me went very still. Not calm. Exactly. More like the kind of quiet that comes right before you decide you are done being polite. I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. Like he had been waiting for me. The house is legally mine, he said. No hello. No apology. Not even the fake concern people use when they know they are being cruel but want to sound civilized. Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My key does not work. I know. I changed the locks. You changed the locks 2 days after our parents' funeral. You had notice. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes the human body does strange things when it is trying not to fall apart. You told me I had a week. I reconsidered. Of course he did. Marcus always reconsidered when reconsidering benefited Marcus. He continued. Dad decided a long time ago. Sons inherit everything. Daughters get nothing. That is how it has always been in this family. And that is how it is going to stay. There it was. The Mercer family gospel. Spoken with the confidence of a man who had never once been told no and had built an entire personality around it. I looked at the wet boxes, at my ruined diploma, at Mom's recipe box sitting crookedly beside a trash bag full of my winter coats. I lived here. Marcus, you stayed there. He corrected. There is a difference. I took care of Mom here. That was your choice. My choice. As if cancer had called a family meeting and asked for volunteers. As if Dad had not called me at work 2 years earlier and said, your mother is sick. You need to come home. Not, we need you. Not, can you help? Just, you need to come home. Because in my family, daughters were not asked. They were assigned. I moved back within a week. I changed my schedule. I worked nights so I could take Mom to chemo during the day. I watched her lose weight. Hair. Strength. Patience. And sometimes hope. I helped her shower when she was too weak to stand. I sat beside her when the nausea hit so hard she cried from frustration. Marcus visited 3 times. 3. Each visit lasted less than an hour. He would arrive in one of his expensive suits, kiss her forehead, check his Rolex, complain about traffic, and leave before the coffee got cold. But apparently I had chosen all that. Apparently love counted as a hobby when a daughter did it. Marcus, I said, Mom died less than a week ago. His voice hardened, and Dad's wishes did not die with her. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because I was surprised. I knew how my father saw me. Robert Mercer loved his family in the way some men love old furniture. He liked us where he expected us to be. Marcus belonged in the garage with tools, blueprints, and Dad's proud hand on his shoulder. I belonged in the kitchen with Mom, learning how to smooth over sharp words and pretend small wounds did not count. When Marcus graduated, Dad paid for his business degree at UConn. When I got into nursing school, Dad said, "Girls do not need expensive educations. You will get married anyway." I got scholarships. I worked. I paid my own way. Dad called Marcus ambitious. He called me practical. That was the polite word for invisible. And now Marcus was standing on the other end of the phone, wearing Dad's belief system like a custom-made suit. "You have 24 hours to get your stuff off the property," he said. "After that, I will have it removed." Removed? Yes. Briana, removed. I am trying to be reasonable. Reasonable. There is a special kind of arrogance in a person who robs you and then expects a thank you note for not using a bigger truck. I looked again toward the window. Victoria had disappeared from view, probably bored now that the poor relation had stopped being entertaining. "You threw my belongings into the rain. You should have taken them sooner. You locked me out of my home. It was never your home." For a second, I could not speak, because the cruelest thing about that sentence was not that Marcus believed it. It was that I had spent most of my life half believing it too. I had lived in that house, cleaned it, cooked in it, paid for groceries when Mom's medical bills got tight, slept in the guest room while Dad snored down the hall and Mom whispered that I was a good girl. Such a good girl. As if goodness were supposed to be enough compensation for being overlooked. But in the Mercer family, a daughter could serve in a house for decades and still be treated like a temporary guest. I ended the call before my voice could break. Then I sat down on the wet grass beside my ruined boxes. I was 32 years old, wearing damp scrubs, holding a warped diploma, locked out of the house where my mother had taken her last careful steps after chemo. My parents were dead. My brother had thrown me away. My sister-in-law had toasted my humiliation from behind glass, and for one terrible minute, I believed Marcus. Maybe I really had nothing. No claim, no place, no family support, no safety net, just a few boxes, a tired body, and a lifetime of being told that love meant accepting less. Then my fingers touched something in my pocket. Mom's Timex watch. The hospital had given it to me with her personal effects. The leather band was cracked, the face scratched from years of use. She wore that watch every day, even after Dad offered to buy her something nicer. Mom always said, "This one still works. Why replace what is faithful?" I held it in my palm and remembered her voice. 3 months before she died, she had squeezed my hand and said, "Whatever happens, Briana, remember that you did everything right. You showed up. That matters more than anyone knows." At the time, I thought she was talking about cancer. I did not know she was warning me. I did not know that while Marcus was counting an inheritance he thought was already his, my mother had spent 8 years preparing for the exact moment he would show me who he really was. I did not know about the lawyer in Hartford. I did not know about the documents. I did not know about the letter waiting in one of those boxes Marcus had carelessly tossed into the yard. All I knew was that I was cold, heartbroken, and standing at the edge of a life I had not chosen. But I also knew one thing Marcus had forgotten. My mother was quiet. She was not weak. That was the part Marcus never understood about her. And frankly, that was his first mistake. My mother, Linda Mercer. I could sit through an entire dinner while my father spoke over her. Marcus bragged about another business deal, and Victoria inspected the silverware like she was checking for fingerprints. And Mom would simply keep passing the potatoes. She would smile softly, ask who wanted more rolls, and make sure everyone's glass was full. To people like my father, that looked like obedience. To people like Marcus, it looked like weakness. To me, it looked like survival. I grew up in a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet Connecticut suburb. The kind of neighborhood where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and pretended not to notice when everybody else's marriage sounded tense through an open kitchen window. My father, Robert Mercer, was a contractor. A successful one, too. Not millionaire successful, despite the way Marcus later acted, but successful enough to buy the house, keep 2 cars in the driveway, and take pride in telling people he built things with his hands. Dad loved saying that. I build things that last. The funny part was, he never seemed interested in building a family that lasted. Just a legacy. And in his mind, legacy had one face. Marcus. My brother was 6 years older than me. And from the time he could hold a hammer, Dad treated him like the prince of plywood. Every Saturday, they were out in the garage together. Dad taught him how to measure twice and cut once, how to hang drywall, how to frame a wall, how to talk to clients, how to shake hands with men who smelled like sawdust and aftershave. I watched from the kitchen window with my hands in dishwater, not because I hated chores. I was a kid. I hated any task that did not involve cartoons, cereal, or getting out of math homework. But I hated more that nobody ever asked if I wanted to learn. 2. One morning, when I was about 10, I walked into the garage and asked Dad if I could help. He looked at me like I had asked to operate heavy machinery while blindfolded. "This is not really for girls, Bree," he said. Bree. That was what he called me when he wanted to sound kind while shutting a door in my face. Marcus laughed. Not a big laugh. Just enough to let me know I had wandered into the wrong place. Mom must have seen my face when I came back inside, because she handed me a dish towel and said, "Come help me with the biscuits." That was my training. Marcus learned how to build houses. I learned how to keep peace inside one. In our family, Marcus got investment. I got instruction. He got opportunities. I got reminders to be useful. Dad did not yell often. He did not need to. His disappointment was organized and efficient. Like everything else about him. When Marcus brought home a report card with average grades, Dad said, "He is a hands-on learner." When I brought home straight A's, Dad said, "That is good. Honey, you will make some man a very organized wife." I wish I could tell you I gave a powerful speech right there at the dinner table. I wish I had dropped my fork, looked him in the eye, and said, "Actually, Dad, I planned to become my own person, but I was a child, so I smiled, swallowed the hurt, and helped Mom clear plates." That was how girls in our house were trained, not with rules written on the refrigerator, but with thousands of little corrections. Sit nicely. Do not argue. Help your mother. Let your brother eat first. He has practice. Do not make your father upset. Be grateful. That last one followed me everywhere. Be grateful. Grateful for what? That was never explained. Grateful I had a roof over my head. Even though Marcus was taught it would someday be his, grateful Dad did not forbid me from studying. Only refused to support it? Grateful Mom loved me enough to soften the blows. Even though she could not stop them, I loved my mother deeply. Let me make that clear. She was the safest part of that house. She smelled like lavender soap and coffee. She hummed old church hymns while folding laundry. She remembered every teacher's name, every sore throat, every school project I forgot to mention until the night before it was due. But she had spent so many years making life bearable that she had almost forgotten she deserved better than bearable. At least, that was what I believed back then. Now I know she was watching, taking notes, waiting. When Marcus graduated high school, Dad paid for his business degree at UConn without blinking. He called it setting the boy up right. I remember that phrase because I was standing in the hallway when he said it, holding a college brochure from a nursing program I had been afraid to show him. Marcus was not even that excited about school. He liked the idea of business because Dad liked the idea of business. He liked wearing button-down shirts and talking about property values. He liked saying words like portfolio and leverage before he fully understood either one, which, to be honest, did not stop him later. Dad glowed around him. When Marcus wanted to get into real estate, Dad introduced him to contractors, developers, inspectors, lenders, and anyone else who might help him step over the hard parts. Marcus called it networking. I called it being handed a ladder and then bragging about climbing. When I told Dad I wanted to go to nursing school, he did not glow. He lowered the newspaper. "Nursing school is expensive," he said. "I know. I have been looking at scholarships." He made a sound through his nose, not quite a laugh. "Worse, girls do not need expensive educations. You will get married anyway." Mom was standing at the stove, stirring soup. Her hand paused for only a second. I looked at her, hoping she would say something. She did not. Not then. So I said, I still want to go. Dad shrugged and lifted the newspaper again. Then you better figure out how to pay for it. And I did. I filled out forms until my eyes burned. I wrote essays about service and compassion while sitting at the kitchen table after everyone else had gone to bed. I worked double shifts at a diner where the coffee was terrible, and the regulars thought $2 was a generous tip if they called you sweetheart while leaving it. I studied anatomy flashcards during breaks. I kept a change of clothes in my car. I learned how to smile at rude customers because tuition did not care about my feelings. When my acceptance letter came, I ran into the kitchen with it in my hand. Mom cried. Dad said, Well, that is nice. Marcus said, Nursing is steady. At least, steady. That was the Mercer family way of saying, small. That night, after Dad went to bed and Marcus left to meet friends, Mom pulled me aside in the laundry room. The dryer was running, making the room warm and loud enough to cover our voices. She took both my hands in hers. I have taken care of you, she whispered. I frowned. Mom, what do you mean? Her eyes were tired, but there was something firm behind them. Something I was too young and too busy surviving to understand. You will not understand now, she said. But I have. I thought she meant she had prayed for me, or saved a little money somewhere. Or maybe she was just trying to make me feel less alone after Dad's cold reaction. I had no idea she had met with a lawyer that same afternoon. I had no idea she had signed the first documents in a plan that would take 8 years to finish. I just hugged her and said, Thank you. She held me longer than usual. Looking back, I think she knew exactly what kind of family I was up against. She knew Dad would never change. She knew Marcus was absorbing his beliefs like dry wood taking stain. And she knew that one day, if she did not put something stronger than hope between me and them, I would be left standing outside in the rain with nothing but a wet diploma and a broken heart. That is the thing about some mothers. They do not always fight loudly. Sometimes they fight quietly. Sometimes they fight with signatures, sealed envelopes, and monthly meetings nobody notices. Sometimes they let cruel men believe they are winning because interrupting them too soon would only make them more careful. My father built houses. My mother built an escape route. And none of us saw it until Marcus slammed the door in my face. And none of us saw it until Marcus slammed the door in my face. But the truth is, that door had been closing on me for years. It started closing the day Dad called me at work. I was halfway through a shift at Maplewood Senior Living, helping Mrs. Patterson argue with her blood pressure cuff like it was personally insulting her. When my phone buzzed in my pocket, I almost ignored it. We were not supposed to take personal calls on the floor unless it was an emergency. And my father never called me during work. That was the first sign something was wrong. I stepped into the supply room and answered. Briana, Dad said. Not Bree. Not honey. Briana. My stomach tightened. Dad? What happened? There was a pause. Then his voice came through flat and heavy. Your mother is sick. You need to come home. Not, we need to talk. Not, can you help us? Just, you need to come home. Like he was assigning me a chore he had already decided was mine. What do you mean sick? She has breast cancer. I remember staring at a shelf full of adult briefs and wound care supplies. Because life has a cruel sense of timing. The fluorescent light above me buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed at the television in the common room. What stage? I asked. Stage 3. That was when my knees felt soft. I was a nurse. I knew enough to be scared. And that is sometimes worse than knowing nothing at all. Within a week, I moved back into the house on Maple Drive. I packed my apartment into plastic bins, gave notice to my landlord, and asked my supervisor if I could switch to night shifts. Diane Foster, the head nurse, looked at me over her reading glasses and said, Are you sure you can handle that? I said yes. That was my first lie, not because I did not want to do it. I did. This was my mother. She had held my hair when I had the flu, sat through every school play, and once drove 40 miles because I forgot my clinical shoes before an exam. If she needed me, I was coming. But wanting to help and being able to carry everything are two different things. My days became a schedule written in pill bottles, appointment cards, and insurance forms. I worked from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. Then I drove home with the windows cracked, even in winter. because cold air was the only thing keeping me awake. I would shower, make Mom breakfast, check her nausea medication, and drive her to chemo in Hartford. Chemo rooms are strange places. People speak softly there. Machines beep. Nurses move with that calm, practiced kindness that tells you they have seen fear in every possible shape. Mom always wore a lavender scarf around her head after her hair started falling out. She said it made her look like an artist. I told her she looked beautiful. She rolled her eyes and said, "You are a sweet liar." That was my mother. Sick as she was, she could still spot nonsense from across a parking lot. The first few months were the hardest physically. The treatments made her weak. Food tasted metallic. Some mornings, she could only manage toast and ginger tea. Other mornings, she would sit at the kitchen table and stare at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I used to do everything with these hands," she said once. I sat beside her and rubbed lotion into her fingers. "You still do plenty, Briana." "What?" "I know when you are nursing me. I am a nurse. You are also my daughter." That one shut me up, because she was right. I did not always know where one ended and the other began. At work, I could be professional. I could explain medication side effects, help people bathe, change dressings, calm families, and keep moving. At home, every symptom felt personal. Every bad day felt like a threat. Every good scan felt like I could breathe for 20 minutes before fear came knocking again. Dad did not know what to do with any of it. To be fair, and I try to be fair even when people do not deserve a discount, I think he was scared. But fear in my father did not come out as tenderness. It came out as silence, impatience, and pretending he had more important things to handle. He kept working. He stayed late at job sites. He ate the meals I cooked and said things like, "Your mother seems tired today," as if cancer were a mood problem. When Mom got sick after treatment, he would stand in the bathroom doorway, helpless and annoyed. "Do you need me?" he would ask, already leaning away like he hoped the answer was no. I would say, "I've got her," and he would leave. Those 3 words became my whole life. I've got her. I said it when Mom needed help getting out of bed. I said it when the pharmacy mixed up a prescription. I said it when the insurance company denied a claim, and I spent 2 hours on hold listening to cheerful music that made me consider throwing the phone into the microwave. I said it when Dad forgot her oncology appointment because Marcus had invited him to lunch with a developer. I said it when Mom cried in the laundry room because she was tired of being brave. I had her. Marcus did not. My brother lived in Greenwich with Victoria in a 5-bedroom house with stone columns, a driveway that curved like it thought highly of itself, and a mortgage I later learned was choking them. Back then, all I saw was the performance. The suits, the watch, the new BMW, Victoria's photos from charity luncheons where nobody looked charitable. Marcus visited Mom 3 times in 2 years. The first time, he brought flowers from a grocery store, still in the plastic sleeve with the price sticker on the bottom. He kissed Mom's forehead, stood by her recliner for 12 minutes, then checked his Rolex. "Traffic back to Greenwich is going to be brutal," he said. Mom smiled like it did not hurt. "Thank you for coming, sweetheart," he said. Of course, as if he had done something heroic. The second time, he brought Victoria. She walked through the house taking pictures, for memories. Though most of the pictures seemed to be of the crown molding, the fireplace, and the kitchen cabinets. She asked Mom how she was feeling, then started talking about a renovation she wanted. Mom was wrapped in a blanket, pale and thin, nodding politely while Victoria complained about marble prices. I remember standing in the doorway with a tray of tea and thinking, if selfishness had a fragrance, it would smell like her perfume. The third time Marcus came alone. Mom was having a better day, so she tried to sit at the table with us. I made chicken soup. Dad talked to Marcus about a property deal. Marcus talked about interest rates. Mom asked him if he was sleeping well. He said, "Work has been crazy." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "Take care of yourself." He let her hand rest there for about 5 seconds before checking a text. That was it. 3 visits. No overnight stays. No driving to appointments. No pharmacy runs. No sitting beside her during infusion. No cleaning up after the worst side effects. No learning which crackers she could tolerate, which blanket she liked, which hymn helped her fall asleep when pain made her restless. But Dad still spoke about Marcus like he was the pillar of the family. "He is under a lot of pressure," Dad would say. So was I. But apparently pressure only counted if you wore a tie. There were nights I drove to Maplewood so tired that I slapped my own cheek at red lights to stay alert. There were mornings I cried in the shower for 5 minutes, then turned off the water and went downstairs smiling because Mom was awake. There were weeks my paycheck dropped because I had to adjust hours, and I quietly put groceries on my credit card. I did not tell Mom that part. She knew anyway. Mothers usually do. One night, after a rough treatment, I helped her into bed. Her hands were trembling. She looked smaller than she should have, swallowed by the quilt she had made when I was in high school. "You are such a good girl," she whispered. I tucked the blanket around her. "You do not have to say that." "Yes," she said. "I do." Her eyes found mine, clear, despite the pain medicine. "Whatever happens, Briana, remember that you did everything right. You showed up. That matters more than anyone knows." I thought she meant the cancer. I thought she was afraid she might not survive and wanted me to feel at peace. So I kissed her forehead and told her not to talk like that. She gave me the smallest smile, always bossy in scrubs. I laughed because she wanted me to. But when I turned off the lamp, she caught my wrist. "Promise me you will not let anyone make you small." I looked at her in the dark room, with the hallway light falling across her tired face. "Mom, I promise." At the time, I thought promises were just words you said to comfort the dying. I did not understand that my mother was not preparing to die. She was preparing me to live. I did not understand that my mother was not preparing to die. She was preparing me to live. That sounds obvious now. Sitting here with the benefit of hindsight and a cup of coffee that did not come from a hospital vending machine. But back then, I was too tired to see the pattern. I was living one appointment, one prescription refill, one insurance argument at a time. When you are caring for someone you love, your world gets very small. You stop thinking in years. You think in hours. Did Mom eat breakfast? Did she keep it down? Did the pharmacy call? Did the oncologist change the dosage? Did Dad remember anything besides his own inconvenience? Usually, the answer to that last one was no. But hope is a stubborn little fool. Still, there were things I noticed. Mom had started asking me to drive her to Hartford once a month. She said it was for insurance paperwork, sometimes medical billing, sometimes just a few signatures. The office was in an old brownstone downtown, the kind of place with polished brass on the door and lawyers' names engraved like they expected respect before you even stepped inside. The first time I drove her there, I offered to come in. "No, sweetheart," she said, resting her hand on mine. "This is boring grown-up nonsense. You would fall asleep." "Mom, I handle Medicare paperwork for fun now. My standards are already underground." She laughed, which made me feel like I had won something. But she still went in alone. I waited in the car with the heater running, answering emails from work and pretending not to watch the front door every 2 minutes. She was inside for almost an hour. When she came back out, she looked exhausted, but lighter somehow. Not physically. Cancer did not allow that kind of generosity. It was something in her face, like she had set down a bag she had been carrying for years. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Everything is going to be imminent," she said. I remember that exactly because it sounded strange. Not everything is okay. Everything is going to be. At the time, I thought maybe she had sorted out some medical coverage issue. Maybe she had updated a beneficiary form. Maybe she was making sure Dad would be fine if something happened to her. That was how deeply trained I was. Even when my mother was sick, I assumed her planning was for everyone else. I did not imagine she was planning for me. The trips continued. Once a month, sometimes twice, if she said there had been a change. She always dressed carefully for those appointments. Even on the days she could barely stand long enough to brush her teeth, she would ask me to help her into a clean blouse and her good navy cardigan. She would put on lipstick with a trembling hand and say, "If I have to discuss paperwork, I refuse to look like paperwork." That was Linda Mercer for you. Cancer could take her hair, her strength, to her appetite, and her patience, but it never took her manners, or her quiet little insults. The name on the office door was Harrison and Cole. I saw it often enough that it became familiar, but I never asked too many questions. Looking back, maybe part of me did not want to know. Families like mine teach you not to look behind closed doors. You learn that asking questions can turn you into the problem. One afternoon, after one of those meetings, Mom asked me to stop at a small cafe near the river. She ordered tea and a bowl of soup, then barely touched either one. Her hands were folded around the cup for warmth. "Briana," she said, "do you trust me?" That got my attention. "Of course I do. I mean, really, trust me." I leaned back. "Mom, you are scaring me. I am not trying to Isna." "Well, congratulations. Because you accidentally nailed it." She smiled. But it faded quickly. "There may come a time when things feel very unfair." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because unfair had been living rent-free in our family for decades. "Mom, things have felt unfair for a while." "I know," she said. Those two words were so soft. But they hit me hard. "I know. Not, you are too sensitive. Not, your father means well. Not, Marcus has pressures you do not understand. Just, I know." I stared at her across that little cafe table. And for the first time, I wondered how much she had truly seen. The birthday dinners where Dad praised Marcus for showing up and thanked me for serving dessert. The way Marcus interrupted me, and nobody corrected him. The way Victoria looked through me as if my scrubs made me part of the furniture. Mom reached across the table and touched my wrist. "I could not change your father," she said. I swallowed. "I know. I tried in ways you never saw." I did not know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part of me wanted to ask why trying had not looked more like protecting me when I was a child. Both feelings were true. And that is one of the hardest parts of loving a parent. Gratitude and hurt can sit at the same table. Mom looked out the window for a moment. "Your father believes certain things so deeply that facts cannot reach him. He believes sons carry a family forward. He believes daughters leave. He believes service is natural for women, and achievement is natural for men. That is a polite way to describe it. I am still your mother. I can be polite while calling someone a fool." That made me laugh, and she looked pleased. Then her expression turned serious again. "But I want you to understand something. Your father's beliefs are not law." I wish I had held on to that sentence harder. Back then. I nodded, thinking she meant it in a general, emotional way. Like, do not let his opinions define you. A sweet mother-daughter lesson over lukewarm tea. I did not realize she meant it literally. His beliefs were not law. His wishes were not ownership. His favoritism was not a deed. His assumptions were not a will. Over those 8 years, my mother had been doing something almost nobody in our family believed she could do. She had been planning. Carefully. Legally. Patiently. It started, I later learned, around the time I got accepted into nursing school. The same week, Dad told me girls did not need expensive educations. Mom called a lawyer named Evelyn Cole. She did not call to complain. She did not call to vent. She called to ask what power she actually had. That was my mother's real gift. Once she stopped believing she could change Robert Mercer, she started asking what she could control. And what she could control was more than Marcus ever imagined. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitfield, had given Mom money over the years. Not money from Dad. Not marital money. Her own family money. Given quietly. Legally. And separately. Dad never paid attention because he saw women's finances the way he saw women's opinions. Small. Harmless. And not worth studying too closely. That was his mistake. Mom took that money and built something outside his reach. She worked with Evelyn to establish an irrevocable trust. She made sure the funds were never mixed with Dad's accounts. She kept records. She signed documents. She updated beneficiary forms. She did everything by the book. Then probably alphabetized the book. Because Linda Mercer could not help herself. Every month, when I thought I was driving her to insurance appointments, I was driving her to build a wall between me and the future Marcus was counting on. She also began reviewing the house. That part still amazes me. The house on Maple Drive had always been treated as Dad's castle. He bought it, improved it, bragged about it, and acted like every nail in the place had sworn loyalty to him personally. But years earlier, when his contracting business faced a potential lawsuit. He transferred the property into Mom's name for liability protection. Evelyn later told me it was common enough. Practical. Legal. Clean. Dad assumed it was temporary. Mom knew better than to remind him. Some people call that sneaky. I call it knowing your opponent. If a man spends a lifetime underestimating his wife, she is not obligated to interrupt him. Mom kept the house in her name. She updated her will. She documented her choices. She even had a doctor confirm she was mentally competent when the cancer got worse. Because she knew Marcus. She knew he would claim she was confused, medicated, pressured, or manipulated. He would say anything before admitting his mother had chosen with a clear mind. So she made the truth harder to attack. That was not bitterness. That was strategy. There was one night, maybe 6 months before the accident, when I found her sitting alone at the kitchen table. Dad was asleep. The house was quiet. A folder was open in front of her, but she closed it when I walked in. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Just thinking. That is dangerous at this hour." She smiled and tapped the folder. "Sometimes peace requires paperwork." "I thought she was talking about medical bills," I said. "That should be printed on every hospital brochure in America." She laughed softly, then reached for my hand. "Briana, promise me something." I sat down across from her. "Another promise? You are getting greedy. Promise me that when the time comes, you will not sign anything just because someone pressures you." I frowned. What would I be signing? "Just promise." Her voice was gentle, but there was steel under it. So I promised, and because I trusted her, I did not push. Maybe I should have. Maybe she would have told me more, but I think she wanted to spare me the weight of knowing too soon. She knew I was already carrying her illness, Dad's coldness, Marcus's absence, and my own exhaustion. She did not want to add legal warfare to the pile. She carried that part alone. For 8 years, my mother moved quietly through a house where men believed they held all the power. She cooked their meals, folded their shirts, smoothed over their moods, sat through their opinions. And all the while, she was doing the one thing they never expected from her. She was making sure the daughter they dismissed would not be left defenseless. Marcus thought he was the heir. Dad thought he had the final word. Victoria thought I was just the tired nurse in cheap shoes. And Mom? Mom was signing papers in Hartford with lipstick on, a navy cardigan over her shoulders, and a plan sharp enough to cut through generations of Mercer nonsense. She never raised her voice. She never threatened anyone. She never said, "You will regret this." She did not have to. She had Evelyn Cole. She had my grandmother. She had legal documents, clean records, and the patience of a woman who had spent her whole life being underestimated. And let me tell you something I wish I had learned sooner. Never confuse quiet with helpless. Sometimes quiet is where the plan is being made. Sometimes quiet is where the plan is being made. And while my mother was making hers, Marcus and Victoria were busy making a show. That was the thing about my brother. He did not just want to be successful. He wanted to look successful from a distance, preferably from across a country club dining room where people could admire the watch, the shoes, the wife, the car, and the smug little smile that said, "Yes, I belong here." Marcus had always been good-looking in that polished, salesman kind of way. Tall, broad shoulders, thick dark hair that he managed like a business asset. He wore tailored suits even to casual family dinners, which always made me wonder if his closet had ever seen a sweatshirt or if Victoria had it removed for lowering property values. Victoria was worse, because she had taken shallowness and turned it into a lifestyle brand. She called herself a socialite. Now, I am from Connecticut, so I know that word can mean many things. In Victoria's case, it meant she attended charity luncheons, took photos at gallery openings, and posted pictures of handbags that cost more than my first car. She had a way of looking at people without really seeing them, unless they had money, influence, or a last name she could use. I had none of those things. I had scrubs, practical shoes, student loans, and a talent for getting stubborn elderly men to take their blood pressure medication. Not exactly Victoria's dream guest list. The first time she visited after marrying Marcus, she walked into the house on Maple Drive and said, "Oh, this is charming. Not warm, not beautiful, charming. The way people describe an old motel when they are trying not to say outdated. Mom smiled anyway and offered coffee. Dad loved Victoria at first because she made Marcus look important. She came from one of those families that had less money than they acted like, but enough polish to fool men like my father. She knew how to laugh softly at his stories, ask about his business, and compliment the crown molding in a tone that made him feel like a master craftsman instead of a man who confused control with leadership. Marcus ate it up. He and Victoria bought a 5-bedroom house in Greenwich a few years after their wedding. I remember the first time Mom showed me pictures. Stone, front, tall windows, perfect landscaping, and a kitchen so white it looked like nobody was allowed to chew in it. Beautiful. Isn't it? Mom said. It looks like a house that would judge my socks. Mom laughed so hard she had to sit down. Dad bragged about that house as if he had paid for it himself. My son is doing well. He told everyone. And maybe Marcus was doing well at first. Real estate had been kind to people who knew the right people, and Dad had handed him enough connections to make failure inconvenient. Marcus worked at a respected firm. He drove a BMW. Victoria wore diamond earrings to brunch. Because apparently eggs taste better when your ears sparkle. But over time, little cracks started showing. Marcus became more restless. He checked his phone constantly. He snapped when Dad asked simple questions about work. He stopped talking about closed deals and started talking about markets shifting and temporary cash flow issues. Those phrases sound professional, but I have worked around enough families in crisis to know when someone is putting cologne on panic. Victoria changed too. She got sharper. Not honest, just sharper. At Thanksgiving 2 years before Mom died, when Mom was still well enough to cook most of the meal, Victoria sat at our dining room table and studied me like I was a stain she had decided not to mention until dessert. I had come straight from a shift, changed in the downstairs bathroom, and helped Mom with the turkey. My feet hurt. My hair was pulled back. I was wearing a plain navy dress I bought on clearance, which Victoria probably sensed the way a hunting dog senses movement. So, Briana, she said, lifting her wine glass. Have you ever thought about doing something with more upward mobility? I looked up from the mashed potatoes. I'm sorry? With your career, she said. I mean, nursing is noble, obviously, but you cannot wipe old people's bottoms forever. The table went quiet. I wish I could say Marcus looked embarrassed. He did not. Dad cleared his throat but said nothing, which was his favorite form of leadership when I was the one being insulted. Mom's hand tightened around her fork. I smiled because years of customer service had trained me not to throw gravy at people, even when the gravy deserved better. I'm a registered nurse, I said. I help people stay alive, comfortable, and dignified. Sometimes that includes things polite people pretend never happen. Victoria blinked. Mom coughed into her napkin. But I knew that cough. She was hiding a laugh. Victoria recovered with a thin smile. Of course. I only meant you are capable of more. That was rich, coming from a woman whose main skill was making lunch reservations sound like public service. Later that night, I went to the kitchen for water and heard Marcus and Victoria in the hallway near the front room. They were speaking softly, but not softly enough. Do not worry about her, Marcus said. I stopped behind the kitchen door. Your father is sure? Victoria asked. Dad has promised everything to me for years. The house, the accounts, whatever is left. He believes in sons. You know that. And Briana? Marcus gave a short laugh. She is not getting anything. She is just here to play nurse until Mom is gone. Then she can disappear back into whatever sad little life she has. My hand tightened around the glass. There are insults that hit you right away. And there are insults that crawl under your skin and wait there. That one did both. Victoria lowered her voice. But I still heard her. Good. We need this. Marcus. We really need this. That was the first time I understood something was wrong. Not the cruelty. I knew they had that in stock. The desperation. Victoria did not sound greedy in that moment. She sounded scared. I leaned against the door, holding my breath, while Marcus said, I have it handled. You always say that, and I always do. No. Marcus, this time is different, he snapped. Keep your voice down. That was when Dad walked by from the living room and called out, "Everything all right?" Marcus answered smoothly, "All good, Dad." And Dad believed him. Of course he did. Dad would have believed Marcus if he stood in the kitchen holding a smoking toaster and said the bread had attacked first. I went back to my room that night and sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the water glass. Mom was asleep down the hall. Dad was watching television. Marcus and Victoria were acting normal again, laughing politely over pie, as if I had not just heard them discuss my future like I was a broken chair waiting for pickup. I did not tell Mom. I told myself she was sick. She did not need another worry. I told myself Marcus was only being Marcus, which was the family version of saying, "Yes, the dog bites, but he lives here." But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid because if Dad had really promised Marcus everything, then I knew exactly how this would end. I would give up years of my life to care for Mom, bury both my parents someday, and then be thanked with a cardboard box and a lecture about how daughters should not expect too much. I did not know yet that Mom had already expected it for me. I only knew Marcus and Victoria were counting on money they had not earned, from people they barely served. Over the next year, their performance got louder. Victoria posted more pictures, more dinners, more champagne floats, more shopping bags, more smiling captions about gratitude. Which is always interesting from people who confuse gratitude with good lighting. Marcus talked bigger at family gatherings. He mentioned investment opportunities, luxury buyers, private clients, exclusive listings. But when Dad asked basic questions, Marcus got vague. "How is business?" Dad would say. "Complicated, but strong." What does that mean? It means I know what I am doing. That answer worked on Dad. It did not work on Mom. I saw her watching him one evening while he talked about a development deal. She sat in her recliner, a blanket over her knees, her face pale from treatment. But her eyes were sharp, not angry, not sad, measuring. After Marcus left, she asked Dad, "Has he borrowed money from you recently?" Dad frowned. "Marcus does not need to borrow money. That was not what I asked." Dad folded his newspaper. "Linda, do not start." There it was, the wall. Do not start meant do not question the sun. Do not start meant do not disturb the fantasy. Do not start meant Marcus's image mattered more than the truth. Mom said nothing else. But later I found her in the kitchen, writing something in a small notebook she kept tucked inside a drawer with old grocery lists and rubber bands. "What are you doing?" I asked, keeping track. "Of what?" She closed the notebook. "Things people think no one notices." I should have asked more. But by then, I was used to not pressing. I was tired. And Mom had learned how to keep her secrets wrapped in ordinary words. The last Thanksgiving before the accident, Victoria barely spoke to Mom. She spent most of the meal texting under the table and whispering to Marcus. At one point, I heard the words deadline, bank, and inheritance in the same sentence. Marcus caught me looking. His face hardened. "What?" he said. "Nothing." "Then stop staring." Mom looked between us, and for a moment I saw something pass across her face. Not surprise. Confirmation. That night, as I helped her to bed, she said, "People show you who they are when they think they are close to getting what they want." I pulled the blanket over her. "That sounds like something from one of your courtroom shows." "Those shows are educational, Mum. Half the lawyers on those shows solve cases by yelling in hallways. And yet, I learn." I smiled, but she did not. "Briana," she said, "do not envy people who need an audience to feel important." I thought she was talking about Marcus and Victoria's showy life. Now I know she was warning me about a bigger truth. People who build their lives on appearances will do almost anything when the appearance starts cracking. They will lie. They will pressure. They will rewrite history. They will call greed, tradition, and cruelty practicality. And when the money they were counting on slips away, they will not suddenly become fair. They will become dangerous. Marcus and Victoria were not just waiting for my parents to die. They were waiting to be rescued. They thought the house on Maple Drive was their lifeboat. They thought Dad's old beliefs were a legal document. They thought I was too tired, too obedient, too trained by years of being dismissed to stand in their way. And honestly, at that time, maybe they were right about the tired part, but they were wrong about one thing. They thought my mother was too weak to stop them. That mistake was going to cost them everything. That mistake was going to cost them everything. But before it cost them anything, it cost me one of the worst nights of my life. The funeral was on a Monday. I still remember the weather because grief makes strange little details stick. The sky was pale gray. Not stormy. Not clear. Just tired looking. Like even the weather had shown up out of obligation and did not know what to say. St. Andrew's Episcopal Church was filled with people I had not seen in years. Former neighbors. Dad's old clients. Women from Mom's church circle. A few of my coworkers from Maplewood. People who brought casseroles, squeezed my hands, and said things like, "Your mother was such a light." Marcus gave the eulogy. He talked about Dad for almost the entire time. Dad's work ethic. Dad's reputation. Dad's business. Dad's lessons. Dad's pride in his son. He mentioned Mom twice. Once as a devoted wife. Once as the heart of the home. That was it. 2 years of cancer. Decades of patience. A lavender garden. Handwritten birthday cards. Sunday dinners. Quiet sacrifices. And all she got from her son was 2 polished phrases tucked between stories about Robert Mercer and power tools. I sat in the front pew with Mom's Timex watch in my purse and bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. At the reception, people came up to me one after another. "Briana, your mother told me how much you did for her. She was so proud of you. She said you were her rock." I nodded, thanked them, and tried not to cry into the coffee urn. There is nothing elegant about grief at a church reception. You are standing there in black clothes, eating grocery store cookies, while everyone talks in soft voices like the dead might be sleeping in the next room. Then Marcus pulled me aside. Not into a private office, not outside where we could speak like adults. Just to the edge of the church vestibule, beside a table of sympathy cards and wilting lilies. "We need to talk about the house," he said. I stared at him. "The house?" "Yes, Marcus. We buried them 2 hours ago." His jaw tightened, like my grief was making him late for something. "I know this is emotional, but we need to be practical." Practical, that word again. In families like ours, practical usually meant someone was about to do something cruel and wanted credit for staying calm. "The will has not even been read," I said. "The will is a formality." Behind him, Victoria stood near the door, scrolling on her phone. She wore a black dress, pearls, and the bored expression of a woman waiting for her driver. Except the driver was Marcus, and the car still had payments. "Dad made his wishes clear years ago," Marcus said. "The house is mine. The accounts are mine. His tools, his truck, everything connected to the business. That is how he wanted it." "And Mom?" I asked. He blinked, as if I had brought up a decorative side issue. "What about Mom?" The question hit me harder than it should have. What about Mom? The woman whose hands had folded every sheet in that house. The woman who knew which window stuck in July and which step creaked at night. The woman who had picked the paint color for the kitchen and planted lavender the year I was born. The woman who had lived there, worked there, suffered there, and died believing that house meant more than a roof. To Marcus, she was just another item under Dad's name. "You need to clear out your things by the end of the week," he said. "My things are already there because I live there. You stayed there." I looked at him for a long moment. "Do you hear yourself? I am trying to make this easier." "No, you are trying to make this fast." His face hardened. "You should be grateful I am giving you a week." That word almost made me laugh. Grateful. I had been grateful my whole life. Grateful for leftovers of attention. Grateful for being allowed to pay my own way. Grateful for praise only when I served someone else. Grateful for not being treated worse. Gratitude, when demanded by selfish people, is just a leash with better manners. "I took care of Mom for 2 years," I said, "and nobody forced you. Dad called me home. Because you were available, I changed my entire life. You are a nurse, Briana. Taking care of people is what you do." There it was, my love reduced to labor. My sacrifice reduced to a job description. I wanted to slap him. I did not. Because I am a nurse and because church vestibules are generally bad places to start family assault cases. But I wanted to. Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I know this is hard for you, but you need to understand reality. You do not have a claim here. Dad believed sons inherit. He told me that for years. You knew it too. I knew Dad was unfair. That is not the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. He stepped back and adjusted his cufflinks. They were silver, engraved, and probably bought with money he did not have. 1 week, he said. Then I am changing the locks. I should have said more. I should have told him that Mom had mattered. That the house was not a prize for the loudest child. That I was not some unpaid caretaker he could dismiss now that the work was done. But grief had emptied me out. So I said, "We will discuss it at the will reading." He smiled then. A cold little smile that looked too much like Dad. "You are going to be disappointed." He walked away before I could answer. Victoria finally looked up from her phone, gave me a small, pitying smile, and followed him out. That was Monday. He did not wait a week. On Wednesday evening, I finished a 12-hour shift at Maplewood. One of my patients had fallen that morning. Another had been refusing medication. And Mrs. Patterson spent 20 minutes telling me her daughter never called, then insisted she was not lonely. By the time I got to my car, my feet ached, my back was stiff, and my head felt packed with cotton. I drove home on autopilot. Home, that word still belonged to Maple Drive in my mind. I pulled into the driveway around 7 in the evening. The porch light was on. For half a second, I thought maybe Marcus had cooled down. Maybe he was inside. Embarrassed. Ready to pretend he had only been stressed. That was how men in my family apologized. They did not say sorry. They just expected everyone to accept their next normal sentence as a peace offering. I put my key in the lock. It did not turn. I tried again. Nothing. I checked the key like it might have changed shape in my hand. Then I saw the new metal around the deadbolt. Fresh, shiny, wrong. My stomach dropped. I walked to the side door. New lock. Then to the garage. That was where I saw the boxes. At first, I could not understand what I was looking at. Cardboard boxes were stacked along the garage wall and spilling onto the grass. Trash bags leaned against them, half open. My winter coat was hanging out of one like a body part. A pair of shoes lay in the mud. Then I recognized my nursing textbooks, my clothes, my framed photos, my mother's recipe box, my life, sorted with all the care of a garage sale. Nobody wanted to host. The rain had come through earlier that afternoon. One of those cold spring rains that soaks everything before you even notice it has started. 2 boxes had collapsed at the corners. My diploma was inside one of them. Wet and warped. The ink beginning to blur along the edge. I picked it up and just stood there. That diploma had cost me years of work. Late nights. Bad coffee. Sore feet. Loans. Scholarships. Diner shifts where men called me sweetheart and left pocket change like they were funding my future out of generosity. Marcus had tossed it out like junk mail. Through the front window, I saw movement. Victoria crossed the living room holding a glass of wine. She had already made herself comfortable. Of course she had. Nothing says morning like trespassing with Chardonnay. She saw me standing in the rain. For 1 second, our eyes met. Then she lifted the glass. A toast. Small. Delicate. Cruel. I felt something in me go cold. Not broken. Cold. There is a difference. Broken people beg. Cold people start remembering details. I called Marcus. He answered right away. "The house is legally mine," he said. "You changed the locks." "Yes. You said I had a week. I changed my mind." "You threw my belongings into the rain." "You had time to remove them." "I was at work." "That is not my problem." I looked at Mom's recipe box, its corner dark with water. "Marcus, this was my home." "No, it was Dad's house. Now it is mine." "You do not know that." I had my lawyer look at it. That line stayed with me. His lawyer, not the estate lawyer. Not the will reading. His lawyer. Meaning he had already prepared for this before my parents were even in the ground. "You have 24 hours, he said. "Get everything off the property, or I will have it hauled away. Mom's things are in these boxes. Then I guess you should take better care of them." That was the sentence that ended my old life. Not because it was the cruelest thing he had ever said. It was not. Marcus had a deep bench when it came to cruelty. But because in that moment, he was not just dismissing me. He was dismissing her. The woman who had loved him, protected his feelings, sent birthday checks, saved newspaper clippings when his name appeared in some real estate announcement, sat through his rare visits and smiled like 1 hour from her son was a feast. He could throw her recipe cards into the rain and still believe he was the injured party. That kind of entitlement cannot be reasoned with. I ended the call. For a while, I just stood there in the wet grass. Then I sat down beside the boxes because my legs decided they had resigned from service. I was still in my scrubs. My socks were damp. My hands shook as I sorted through what could be saved. A sweater, some photographs, a cracked mug, Mom's gardening gloves. Then I found the cream-colored envelope. It was tucked inside a small box of Mom's things, beneath a stack of old photographs and a packet of lavender seeds. The envelope was sealed. My name was written across the front in her handwriting, for Briana. When the time comes, I stared at those words until the rain blurred them. The time comes, not if, when. My mother had known, somehow. Sitting there outside the house Marcus thought he had stolen, with Victoria drinking wine behind my own windows and my life packed into wet cardboard. I felt less alone. I did not open the letter yet. I was too cold, too angry, too afraid that if I read my mother's words in that moment, I would fall apart so completely nobody would be able to put me back together, at least of all me. So I tucked the envelope inside my scrub jacket, pressed it flat against my chest, and called the only person I could think of, Diane Foster. She answered on the third ring. Briana? I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her voice changed immediately. Where are you? Outside the house. I managed. What happened? I looked at the new locks, the ruined boxes, the window where Victoria had been. My brother changed the locks. There was a pause. Then Diane said, in the calm, dangerous voice of a woman who had supervised nurses for 30 years and feared no living man, do not move. I am coming. 30 minutes later, her Honda Odyssey pulled into the driveway like a rescue vehicle with cup holders. Diane got out, took one look at the boxes, and said, well, he is a horse's rear end in dress shoes. That was the first time I laughed that night. Not much. Just enough to prove I still could. She helped me load what we could save. She did not ask unnecessary questions. She did not tell me to calm down. She did not say, but he is your brother, which is one of the most useless sentences ever invented. When we were done, she put her hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. You are coming home with me. I cannot impose. You can and you will. Diane. Briana, I have clean sheets, leftover soup, and a couch that has heard worse stories than yours. Get in the van? So I got in. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house on Maple Drive. The porch light was still on. The windows glowed warmly. From the outside, it looked like home, but inside, something ugly had taken over. I touched the envelope through my jacket. For Briana. When the time comes, I did not know yet what my mother had left behind. I only knew that Marcus had made his move too soon, and for the first time since my parents died, that thought gave me strength. And for the first time since my parents died, that thought gave me strength. Not a lot of strength. Let's not get dramatic and pretend I suddenly became one of those women in movies who stands in the rain with perfect hair and discovers her inner warrior while violins play. I looked terrible. My scrubs were damp. My eyes were swollen. And I had mud on one shoe and not the other, which felt unfairly specific, but I had something. A sealed envelope, my mother's handwriting, and the uneasy feeling that Marcus, for all his confidence, had just walked straight into something he did not understand. Diane drove without talking for the first 10 minutes. That was one of the reasons I loved her. Some people see pain and start filling the room with words because silence makes them nervous. Diane was not nervous. She had spent 30 years as a nurse, which meant she had held hands through bad diagnoses, family fights, final breaths, and insurance nonsense. Silence did not scare her. Stupidity did, but silence did not. Finally, she said, did he threaten you? Not exactly. That means yes, but with nicer shoes. I leaned my head against the passenger window. He said I have 24 hours to get everything off the property. The property, she repeated. Listen to him, like he is foreclosing on a shed. He says the house is legally his. Does he have proof? He says, his lawyer checked. Diane snorted. People say a lot of things after talking to lawyers. Half the time they hear what they want. Pay by the hour. And leave dumber. I almost smiled. Almost. Her apartment was in Hartford. On the second floor of an older brick building that had seen better decades but still had clean hallways and decent heat. She lived alone. Unless you counted a fat orange cat named Winston who looked at me like I had failed a background check. Ignore him, Diane said, unlocking the door. He judges everybody. Last week he hissed at a grocery bag. The apartment smelled like lemon cleaner, coffee, and chicken soup. Nothing fancy. Nothing polished. Just warm. Safe. The kind of place where nobody would throw your diploma into the rain and then act like you should be grateful for the cardboard. Diane pointed down the hall. Bathroom is there. Towels under the sink. Put on something dry. I have sweatpants in the dryer. They are not glamorous. But neither are emotional emergencies. I took the clothes, went into the bathroom, and finally looked in the mirror. That was a mistake. I looked like someone had taken grief, wrung it out, and dressed it in hospital scrubs. My hair was coming loose from its bun. My face was pale. There was a streak of dirt near my jaw, probably from one of the boxes. I washed it off slowly, then changed into Diane's oversized sweatpants and an old Maplewood Senior Living sweatshirt. When I stepped back into the kitchen, Diane had made tea and set a bowl of soup in front of one of the chairs. Eat. I'm not hungry. That was not a survey. I sat. The soup tasted like salt, chicken, and being cared for without having to earn it. I did not realize how badly I needed that until my hands started shaking around the spoon. Diane pretended not to notice. When I finished half the bowl, she nodded toward my jacket hanging over the chair. You kept touching something in the van. I looked at the jacket. The letter. From your brother? From Mom? Diane's face softened. Oh, honey. I took the cream-colored envelope from the pocket. It was slightly bent, but dry. Somehow, out of everything Marcus had ruined, this one thing had survived untouched. My name was written across the front in Mom's careful handwriting. Briana. Under it. Smaller. When the time comes. I ran my thumb over the words. I'm scared to open it. Diane sat across from me. Then be scared and open it anyway. That was Diane's advice in most situations. And irritatingly. It was usually good, so I opened it. The paper inside was the same cream color as the envelope. Folded twice. Mom's handwriting was shakier than usual. She must have written it during treatment, when her hands trembled no matter how hard she tried to hide it. For a second, I could not read past the first line. My darling Briana. Just that nearly broke me. Not because it was sad, though it was, but because it sounded like her. Not Robert's daughter. Not Marcus's sister. Not the nurse. Not the useful one. My darling Briana. I took a breath and read, My darling Briana. If you are reading this, then what I feared has happened. Your father and your brother have shown you exactly who they are. I want you to know. I saw it. I always saw it. My vision blurred. Diane slid a napkin across the table without a word. I kept reading. I could not change your father. God knows I tried. But I could protect you. Contact Evelyn Cole at Harrison & Cole in Hartford. She has everything you need. All the papers. All the arrangements. Everything I could not give you while I was alive. You are not a burden. You never were. You are the best thing I ever did. I love you more than lavender and sunshine and every good thing. Mom. There was a phone number written at the bottom. I read the letter once. Then again. Then a third time. Slower. As if the words might change into something ordinary if I stared long enough. They did not. My mother had known, not guessed, not worried in some vague motherly way. Known. She knew Marcus would turn cruel the moment power was up for grabs. She knew Dad's old beliefs would become a weapon after death. She knew I would be pressured, dismissed, maybe even thrown out. And instead of leaving me with a sweet note about staying strong, she left me a name, a law firm, and instructions. That was so like her I almost laughed. Even from the grave. Linda Mercer had included contact information. Diane leaned forward. Who is Evelyn Cole? A lawyer. Call her. It is late. It is not midnight. It is almost 10. Lawyers have voicemail. Very fancy invention. I looked at the number. What if Marcus is right? What if there is nothing? What if Mom just wanted me to feel better? Diane gave me a look so flat it could have held dinner plates. Briana, I have met a lot of women in my life. The ones who write all the papers in a letter are not talking about good wishes. That was fair. I called. My thumb shook so badly I misdialed the first time. On the second try, the call went through. I expected voicemail, but a professional recording answered and gave an emergency extension for existing clients. I did not know if I counted as an existing client. I pressed it anyway. Because that night had already gone so badly, I figured etiquette was not the main issue. A woman answered after 3 rings. This is Evelyn Cole. Her voice was calm, alert, and not at all like someone who had been interrupted from sleep. Lawyers may be terrifying, but I will say this for them. The good ones can sound prepared even during disasters. My name is Briana Mercer. I said. There was a pause. Then her voice changed. Not surprised? Exactly. But softer. Briana, I have been expecting your call. I closed my eyes. Of all the sentences she could have said, that one nearly took my knees out. My mother left me a letter. I know. My brother changed the locks on the house. I was afraid he might too ace. He threw my things outside. I am very sorry. There was no shock in her voice. No confusion. No, are you sure? She believed me immediately. And after years of having my feelings treated like exaggerations, that alone felt like oxygen. What do I do? I asked. First, do not sign anything Marcus gives you. He already said the house is his. Do not argue with him tonight. But is it? Briana, she said carefully. I cannot explain everything over the phone. And I do not want you reacting before the formal will reading. But I need you to listen to me very closely. Your brother does not know what he thinks he knows. I opened my eyes. Diane was watching me. Eyebrows raised. Evelyn continued. Your mother and I worked together for years. She was very deliberate, very careful. She anticipated several possible scenarios, including pressure from your brother. Pressure? Yes. He may offer you money to sign away claims. He may tell you contesting anything is useless. He may suggest that your father's wishes control everything. That sounds like him. Then remember this. Your father's wishes are not the whole estate. I sat straighter. What does that mean? It means you need to come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring your mother's letter, any identification, and do not speak to Marcus except in writing if possible. My belongings are still outside. Can you retrieve them safely? Some. Diane helped. Good. Document the damaged items. Take photos. Write down what happened while it is fresh. But do not confront him. That was harder than it sounded. There was a version of me that wanted to go back to Maple Drive. Pound on the door. And tell Marcus exactly where he could store his tradition. But that version of me was tired. Vite. And legally uninformed. Not a winning combination. Mrs. Cole, I said. Am I homeless? The question came out smaller than I wanted. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. No, she said. You are displaced. There is a difference. I did not understand then how important that difference was. But I held on to it. Displaced meant moved. Homeless meant erased. Marcus had tried to erase me. My mother had made sure he could not. The next morning, Diane drove me to Harrison and Cole because she said I was in no condition to operate a vehicle, and because, in her words, if your brother shows up, I want to see his face when a woman in orthopedic shoes ruins his day. The law office was in the same brownstone where I had taken Mom all those times. Brass nameplate, heavy wooden door, clean windows. Respectable enough to make my damp boxes and borrowed sweatshirt feel even more ridiculous. I almost turned around. Diane nudged me forward. Go on. Rich-looking buildings are just buildings with better lighting. Inside, Evelyn Cole's assistant greeted me like she had known I was coming. Because apparently everyone in this story knew more than I did. She led me to a corner office with tall windows, shelves of law books, and a desk so organized it made Mom's kitchen drawers look reckless. Evelyn Cole stood when I entered. She was in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with silver hair swept into a neat twist and a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. But her eyes were warm. "Briana," she said, taking my hand. "Your mother spoke about you constantly. That did it. Not the boxes. Not the locks. Not even Victoria's little wine toast." That sentence cracked something open. I covered my mouth, embarrassed by the sudden tears. But Evelyn just handed me a tissue like she had expected that too. "When I could speak," I said. "She told me you had papers." "I do." "How long?" Evelyn sat across from me and folded her hands. 8 years. 8 years. The same amount of time since Mom had squeezed my hands in the laundry room and whispered, "I have taken care of you." "What did she do?" I asked. Evelyn's expression was careful. "Enough. That is not an answer." "No," she said gently. "It is not. And I promise you will get answers at the will reading. But until then, I need you to trust your mother's planning. Can you do that?" I looked down at the letter in my lap. "My darling Briana." I saw it. I always saw it. For the first time in my life, I realized my mother had not been asking me to endure injustice forever. She had been asking me to survive long enough for the truth to arrive. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "I can trust her." Evelyn gave me the smallest smile. "Good. Because your mother is about to have the last word." "Good. Because your mother is about to have the last word." I carried that sentence around for the next week like it was folded inside my chest. Marcus called 3 days before the will reading. I was sitting at Diane's kitchen table, wearing her Maplewood sweatshirt again, because apparently I had entered my borrowed clothing and legal stress era. Winston, the judgmental orange cat, was sitting across from me like he was waiting for me to make another poor life choice. My phone rang. "Marcus." I stared at the screen until Diane looked over from the sink. "Want me to answer and bark?" "No." "Shame. I do a very good bark." I answered. "Briana," Marcus said. And his voice was smooth. Too smooth. Like he had polished it with money he did not have. "What do you want?" "I have been thinking." "That must have been lonely." There was a short silence. Diane turned around and gave me a proud little nod. Marcus continued. "This situation between us has gotten out of hand. You changed the locks and threw my belongings into the rain. I admit I could have handled that better. That is one way to describe illegal, cruel, and stupid." His breathing changed. "I am trying to be reasonable." There was that word again. "If I ever open a diner, I am naming a sandwich the Reasonable Man. It will be mostly bologna. I spoke with my attorney," he said. "And I am prepared to offer you $10,000. I looked at Diane. She mouthed. "For what?" I put the call on speaker. Marcus said. "You sign a simple agreement stating you will not contest Dad's estate or make any claim against the house. In return, I give you $10,000 cash. Enough to help you get settled somewhere. $10,000. For my childhood home. For 2 years of caring for Mom. For every night I drove half asleep after a shift. For every time I swallowed disrespect because I thought keeping peace was love. $10,000 to disappear quietly." "No," I said. His tone shifted. "Think carefully." I did. "No. You have no idea what you are doing. That may be true. Still no. You will get nothing if you fight this. I will see you at the will reading." "You are making a mistake." "Marcus, the only mistake I made was believing you had a bottom. Turns out you brought a shovel." Diane covered her mouth. Marcus hung up. For the first time in days, I slept almost 4 hours in a row. The will reading was scheduled for 2 o'clock on Thursday at Harrison and Cole. I wore the only black dress I still had that was not wrinkled from being packed in a trash bag. Diane drove me and waited downstairs at a coffee shop. Because she said if she came upstairs and heard Marcus speak for more than 2 minutes, she might become part of the legal problem. The conference room had a long mahogany table and windows looking down toward the street. Everything smelled like wood polish and expensive paper. Evelyn sat at the head of the table with folders arranged in front of her. Marcus arrived in a dark suit. Pale blue tie. Rolex, shining like it had something to prove. Victoria came with him, wearing black and pearls. Her face arranged into the expression people use at funerals when they are sad about the inconvenience. Then my grandmother walked in, Eleanor Whitfield, Mom's mother. 82 years old? Straight-backed. Silver hair pinned neatly. Navy dress. sapphire ring on her finger. She moved slowly but with the authority of someone who had outlived nonsense and no longer felt obligated to entertain it. Marcus's smile slipped. "Grandma," he said, "I did not know you were coming." "I was asked to be here," she said, taking the seat beside me. "By whom?" She looked at him. "By my daughter." That shut him up for about 6 seconds. Which may have been a family record. Evelyn began with Dad's will. Marcus leaned back. Already comfortable. Victoria crossed her legs and opened the Notes app on her phone. Probably preparing a shopping list for the inheritance she had been waiting to spend. Evelyn read the formal language first. Debts. Executor. Personal effects. Standard things that sounded important but meant nothing to my shaking hands. Then she reached the distribution. To my son, Marcus, Robert, Mercer. I leave 70% of my personal assets, including my vehicle, workshop tools and equipment, and my share of all financial accounts held jointly with my wife. Marcus nodded slowly, like a king receiving tribute. To my daughter, Briana Lynn Mercer. I leave 30% of my remaining personal assets, Victoria whispered. So basically nothing. I did not look at her. Marcus did. He smiled. Dad was more generous than I expected. Grandma's hand found mine under the table. Evelyn closed the folder. Now we move to Linda Eleanor Mercer's will. Victoria frowned. Why would that matter? Everything was jointly owned. Evelyn looked at her calmly. Not everything. The air changed. Marcus sat up. What does that mean? It means your mother had a separate estate. My mother was a housewife, Marcus said. Grandma's face went cold. Evelyn did not blink. Your mother was a legal adult with separate property, valid documents, and the right to distribute her assets as she chose. Marcus gave a short laugh. Fine. Read it. Evelyn opened the second folder. Linda Eleanor Mercer's will was updated 18 months ago. At the time of signing, she was evaluated by Dr. Sarah Hammond, a board-certified psychiatrist, and found fully competent. Marcus immediately said, she was in chemo. Yes, Evelyn said. Which is why your mother requested the evaluation. She also recorded a video statement explaining her decisions in detail. Evelyn placed a USB drive on the table. Victoria stopped touching her phone. Marcus stared at the drive like it had insulted him. Your mother anticipated a competency challenge, Evelyn said. Grandma murmured. Smart girl. Then Evelyn read Mom's letter. Not the one she left for me. This one was for the room. To my children. Evelyn began. If you are hearing this, then I am gone. And the moment I dreaded has arrived. I love you both. I want you to know that first. But love does not make me blind. Marcus went very still. For 35 years, I watched your father favor Marcus in ways he did not even recognize as favoritism. Sons matter. Daughters serve. I could not change him. Believe me. I tried. I stared at the table, afraid that if I looked up, I would start crying in a way that would involve ugly breathing. Evelyn continued. I watched Briana work twice as hard for half the acknowledgement. I watched her pay her own way through nursing school while Marcus received every advantage. I watched her come home to care for me during the worst 2 years of my life. Marcus visited 3 times. I do not write this to condemn my son. I write it to explain why I made the choices I did. Victoria made a tiny sound. Mom's words filled the room. The assets I leave to Briana are not a reward. They are the balance I could not provide while I was alive. They are what she was always owed. I pressed my lips together. Marcus's face had lost color. Evelyn set the letter down. Now, she said. The house. Marcus straightened. The house is Dad's. No, Evelyn said. 5 years ago, Robert and Linda Mercer executed a deed transfer. The property at Maple Drive was transferred into Linda Mercer's sole name. That was temporary. Marcus snapped. It was never transferred back. Evelyn slid a document across the table. The house? Currently valued at approximately $650,000. Belonged solely to your mother. She left it to Briana. For a moment, nobody spoke. I could hear the building's air system humming. The house. The porch. The kitchen. The lavender garden. The room where Mom had rested after chemo. The front door Marcus locked me out of. Mine. Marcus grabbed the document and scanned it like he could frighten the words into changing. This is wrong. It is recorded with Hartford County, Evelyn said. Victoria whispered. Marcus. But Evelyn was not finished. 8 years ago, your mother established an irrevocable trust, naming Briana as the sole beneficiary. Marcus looked up sharply. A what? An irrevocable trust. It was funded with a gift from Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield. His eyes shot to Grandma. You gave her money? Grandma looked at him like he was a child, asking why rain was wet. I gave my daughter money that was mine to give, Evelyn continued. The funds were invested conservatively. The trust is currently valued at approximately $1,200,000. Victoria's mouth opened. No sound came out. That was a first. Marcus shook his head. Dad did not know. Your father had no legal claim to those funds, Evelyn said. This is fraud. No. Mr. Mercer, this is estate planning. There are few things more satisfying than hearing a calm woman destroy a loud man with vocabulary. Evelyn turned one more page. Your mother also held a life insurance policy valued at $500,000. The sole beneficiary is Briana Lynn Mercer. I stopped breathing for a second. 500,000. Trust. House. Insurance. My mother, who wore a cracked Timex watch and saved rubber bands in a kitchen drawer, had quietly built a future large enough to hold me. Marcus stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. She cannot leave me nothing. She did not, Evelyn said. You receive her personal effects, family photographs, jewelry items not otherwise designated, and a letter addressed to you. A letter? His voice cracked. She leaves her daughter millions. And I get a letter? Grandma said. Maybe you should read it. He ignored her. Evelyn looked down at her notes. To summarize, Briana receives the Maple Drive property, approximately $650,000. The irrevocable trust, approximately $1,200,000. The life insurance policy, $500,000. Plus her share of Robert Mercer's remaining liquid assets, estimated at about $24,000. She looked at me. The total passing to Briana is approximately $2,374,000. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Marcus gripped the table. Victoria looked like someone had unplugged her from the wall. I sat there in my clearance rack black dress, wearing borrowed confidence and my mother's watch, trying to understand that the woman everyone underestimated had just changed my life from beyond the grave. Marcus whispered. You knew. I shook my head. No. You knew. I knew Mom loved me. His face twisted. And she did not love me? That question was the first human thing he had said all day. I looked at him. And for 1 second, I saw the boy who used to let me ride on his shoulders at parades. I think she loved you, I said. But she saw you clearly. He flinched like I had slapped him. Then Victoria found her voice. We need that money. Evelyn's eyes moved to her. I beg your pardon? Victoria froze. Grandma leaned back. Oh, this should be good. Marcus grabbed Victoria's arm. But it was too late. She was pale now, angry and terrified. You do not understand. We have obligations. The house in Greenwich, the investment loss, the bank deadline. Marcus hissed. Stop. But the words were already out. Investment loss, bank deadline, house in Greenwich. So that was it. The suits, the pearls, the perfect post, the country club smile. All of it had been a painted fence around a collapsing yard. Marcus had not thrown me out because he was certain. He had thrown me out because he was desperate. He had not offered $10,000 because he was generous. He had offered it because he was scared I might discover the truth. I looked at my brother, and something inside me settled. For years, I had thought he had power because he was stronger, smarter, more valued. But sitting in that law office, I finally saw him clearly. He was not powerful. He was entitled. And entitlement panics when reality arrives with paperwork. And entitlement panics when reality arrives with paperwork. Marcus proved that about 30 seconds later. At first, he just stared at the documents in front of him. His eyes kept moving from the deed to the trust summary to the life insurance paperwork. Like if he read them in a different order, they might become more agreeable. Victoria sat beside him, one hand over her mouth. breathing through her nose like she was trying not to scream. Evelyn remained perfectly calm. That woman could have read the terms of a nuclear evacuation with the same steady voice she used for estate documents. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "you are entitled to seek independent legal counsel if you wish to review these materials." Marcus looked up slowly. "Review?" he said. "Review what? My mother stole from me." Grandma's chair made a small sound as she shifted. "Careful, Marcus." "No," he snapped. "No, I will not be careful. Everybody in this room has been lying to me." "Nobody lied to you," Evelyn said. "She hid the trust. It was not yours to know about. She hid the house transfer. The deed was publicly recorded. She used my grandmother's money." Grandma's eyebrows lifted. "My money, Marcus, not yours." I know that may be a difficult concept for a man who thinks every woman in this family was born holding his wallet. For one dangerous second, I thought Marcus might yell at her. Then he remembered she was 82. Sharp as a tack, and probably had better lawyers than all of us combined. So he turned back to me. "You planned this." I almost laughed. "Marcus, 3 days ago I was sleeping in borrowed sweatpants at Diane's apartment because you locked me out of my house." "My house?" "No," Evelyn said. Just one word. "Clean, calm, deadly." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Fine. Her house, apparently." Victoria made a broken little sound. "Marcus, what are we going to do?" That question seemed to hit him harder than anything Evelyn had said. Because that was the question underneath all of it, wasn't it? Not what was fair. Not what Mom wanted. Not what I had lost. What are we going to do? Their whole future had been built on a check that was never coming. Marcus pushed his chair back and stood. He took 2 steps toward the window, then stopped. His face had gone gray. Not pale. Gray. His left hand gripped the edge of the table. "Marcus?" Victoria said. He did not answer. His eyes moved strangely, like he was trying to focus on something across the room and could not find it. Evelyn's assistant stood immediately. "Mr. Inverser, you should sit down." "I am fine," he said. He was not fine. The man who had thrown my belongings into the rain, called me a burden, offered me $10,000 to disappear, and strutted into that room, expecting to inherit everything, suddenly looked like a balloon losing air. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then his knees buckled. Victoria screamed. Marcus hit the side of the table on the way down and landed on the carpet with a heavy thud. For a second, nobody moved. Then training took over. I was out of my chair before I had time to think. Say what you want about family trauma, but nurse reflexes do not stop to ask whether someone deserves help. I knelt beside him. "Marcus, can you hear me?" His eyes were closed. He was breathing. Pulse present. Fast, but steady. There was a small cut near his forehead, where he had caught the table edge. Evelyn's assistant was already calling 911. Victoria dropped beside him, crying now, real tears cutting through her makeup. "Marcus, baby, wake up. Please wake up." Grandma stayed in her chair, one hand pressed to her chest. Not from shock exactly. More like she was watching years of bad parenting collapse into one very expensive carpet. I loosened Marcus's tie. Even then, part of me noticed the label. Hermes. Of course, the paramedics arrived in less than 10 minutes. By then, Marcus had come around. He was confused, embarrassed, and trying to sit up while everyone told him not to, which was very on brand for him. "I just got lightheaded," he muttered. One paramedic checked his blood pressure. "Looks like a syncopal episode," he said. "Stress can do it." Stress. That polite little word. Marcus had been crushed by the sudden weight of consequences. But apparently that does not fit neatly on a medical form. They cleaned the cut, recommended that he go to the emergency room for evaluation, and asked if he had chest pain, shortness of breath, or a history of fainting. He said no to everything, Victoria said. "You should go," he snapped. I said I am fine. The paramedic looked at me, and I gave the smallest shrug. You cannot force a stubborn man into common sense unless he is actively unconscious. I had learned that professionally and personally, Marcus refused transport. 20 minutes after collapsing, he was back in his chair, though he looked smaller somehow. His suit was rumpled. His perfect hair was out of place. The cut on his forehead had a small bandage over it. Victoria hovered beside him, her hand on his shoulder. But her eyes were not on him. They were on the papers. The numbers. The money. Evelyn asked if everyone was prepared to continue. Marcus laughed weakly. Do I have a choice? Yes, Evelyn said. You may leave and receive the remaining information in writing. That shut him up. He stayed. Of course he stayed. Men like Marcus want to storm out. But they hate missing details that might still benefit them. Evelyn continued explaining the legal process. The trust would pass outside probate. The insurance would be paid directly to me as beneficiary. The house transfer from Mom's estate would be handled through the proper filings. Dad's remaining assets would be settled separately. Every sentence was another door closing in Marcus's face. He tried again. I am contesting this. You may attempt to contest your mother's will, Evelyn said. But I would advise you to discuss the cost and likelihood of success with your own attorney. My mother was sick. She was evaluated and declared competent. She was on medication. The evaluation accounted for her medical condition. You influenced her. I represented her. You and Grandma turned her against me. Grandma leaned forward. Marcus, your mother did not need help seeing you. You made yourself very visible. His face tightened. That is not fair. No, Grandma said. What was not fair was letting your sister carry your mother's illness while you visited 3 times and then expecting a reward for being born first. Victoria wiped under her eyes with her ring finger. Careful not to smear more mascara than necessary. You do not understand, she said. We were counting on this. The room went quiet again. Even Marcus looked at her like he wished she had swallowed those words. Evelyn's voice stayed mild. Counting on what, Mrs. Mercer? Victoria looked trapped. Our finances are complicated. Grandma made a soft sound. Complicated. That is what people call broke when they still have good shoes. I should not have smiled. I did anyway. Marcus leaned back and covered his face with one hand. Victoria. No. Marcus, she said, her voice rising. You kept saying it would be fine. You said your father had everything arranged. You said the house, the accounts, the sale proceeds. All of it would cover us. Stop talking. We have a foreclosure notice. There it was, plain and ugly. No amount of pearls could dress it up. The Greenwich house, the stone columns, the perfect kitchen, the charity luncheons, the photos, the wine glasses, the smug little comments about my career. It had all been sitting on borrowed time. How much? Grandma asked. Marcus glared at her. That is none of your business. Then stop making it everyone's problem. Victoria broke completely. 400,000 from the investment loss, she said, plus the mortgage, plus private loans, plus credit cards. Evelyn's assistant looked very interested in her notes all of a sudden. Marcus's face was rigid with fury. You just had to say it. Victoria turned on him. Me? You told me your father promised you everything. You told me your sister was no issue. You told me she would take whatever you offered because she had no backbone. That one hit the room differently. No backbone. I sat very still. For years. I had mistaken endurance for weakness. Maybe they had too. Maybe because I stayed quiet. Because I cared for Mom. Because I avoided fights in front of sick people and tired old men. They thought I had no spine. But a spine is not always loud. Sometimes it is the thing that keeps you standing when everyone expects you to crawl. Marcus looked at me then. And for the first time, I did not see superiority in his eyes. I saw need. Briana, he said. I hated the sound of my name in his mouth right then. Soft. Careful. Suddenly human. You have to help me. I blinked. Excuse me? We are family. Family. That word again. Funny how people who treat you like a stranger remember family when the bill comes due. I looked at him for a long moment. You kicked me out of my home 2 days after our parents' funeral. I was under pressure. You threw Mom's things outside. I did not know what was in the boxes. You told me I was a burden. I was angry. You offered me $10,000 to sign away my rights. I was trying to avoid a fight. No. I said. You were trying to buy my silence on clearance. Victoria looked down. Marcus swallowed. I can pay you back. With what? He did not answer. That was answer enough. I am not going to let you become homeless, I said. His eyes lifted. And for a second, hope flashed there. But I am not paying for the choices you made while treating me like I was worthless. The hope disappeared. So you will just watch me lose everything? No, Marcus. I watched Mom lose her health. I watched Dad lose his humanity to pride. I watched you lose your decency one selfish choice at a time. I am done watching your life for you. He flinched. Good. Some truths should sting. I will speak with Evelyn, I continued. If there is a practical side, legal way to make sure you have temporary housing or help finding a financial counselor, I will consider that. But I will not hand you money to save an image you built by stepping on me, Victoria whispered. That is cruel. I turned to her. Cruel was lifting a glass while I stood in the rain. Her mouth closed. Finally, Marcus stared at the table. You changed, he said. I shook my head. No. I just stopped making myself smaller. Grandma's hand found mine again. Evelyn said nothing, but I saw the corner of her mouth move slightly. The meeting ended shortly after that. Marcus and Victoria left first. Not with their old confidence. Not with the polished rhythm of people who believe every room belongs to them. They moved like people who had heard something cracking and realized too late it was their own floor. In the hallway, Victoria was already whispering fast. The bank will not wait. I know, Marcus snapped. My parents cannot help again. I said I know. You said this was handled. He turned on her. And you said you married me for better or worse. She laughed once. Sharp and ugly. I did not marry you for foreclosure. They walked away, still arguing. I watched them go and felt something I did not expect. Not joy. Not revenge. Not the hot satisfaction I used to imagine when people like Victoria finally got humbled. I felt tired. Deeply. Honestly tired. Because justice does not erase what happened. It does not unruin the wet diploma. It does not bring Mom back. It does not make your brother kind or your father fair. It only puts the truth on the table and asks what you are going to do with it. Grandma stood beside me. Are you all right? No. She nodded. Good answer. That made me laugh softly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small navy velvet box. Worn at the corners. Your mother wanted you to have this. Inside was the sapphire ring Grandma had worn for as long as I could remember. I looked at her. I cannot take this. You can, and you will. It was mine. Then your mother's? Then mine again for safekeeping. Now it is yours. My hands shook as I slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Grandma's eyes filled with tears. She wanted you free. Briana. Not just financially. Free from begging people to value you. I looked down at the ring, then back toward the hallway where Marcus and Victoria had disappeared. For the first time, I understood that freedom is not always loud. Sometimes freedom is a quiet hallway, a legal folder, a grandmother's hand, and the choice not to chase people who only turn around when they need something. Sometimes freedom is a quiet hallway, a legal folder, a grandmother's hand, and the choice not to chase people who only turn around when they need something. I wish I could say I walked out of Harrison and Cole that day, feeling powerful. I did not. I walked out feeling like someone had handed me the keys to a life I did not know how to drive. $2,374,000 sounds clean when a lawyer says it at a polished table. In real life, it lands on top of grief, shock, guilt, unpaid bills, wet cardboard, and a mother you still cannot call when you do not know what to do. Diane was waiting downstairs at the coffee shop with 2 paper cups and the expression of a woman prepared to either comfort me or commit a misdemeanor on my behalf. Well? She asked. I sat across from her. The house is mine. Her eyebrows went up. The trust is mine. Both eyebrows stayed up. There is life insurance, too. She leaned back. How much are we talking? I told her. Diane stared at me for a long second. Then looked down at her coffee. I need stronger coffee. That made me laugh. And then, because my emotions had apparently lost all management, I started crying right there between the napkin dispenser and a display of blueberry muffins. Diane reached across the table and held my hand. Good, she said. Good? Yes. Cry now. Saves time later. That was Diane. Practical comfort with no decorative packaging. For the next month, I lived in her spare room. I could have gone back to Maple Drive immediately. Legally, I had every right. Evelyn helped file the proper documents, and the locks were changed again. This time by a locksmith I hired and paid myself. That felt better than it should have. But I was not ready to sleep there. Not yet. A house can be yours on paper and still feel full of ghosts. I could picture Mom in every room, sitting at the kitchen table with tea, folding towels in the laundry room, standing at the back window, checking the lavender garden. I could also picture my belongings in the rain, Victoria's wine glass, Marcus's voice telling me it had never been my home. So I took my time. For the first time in my life, I could. That was one of the first lessons the money taught me. Real security is not about buying fancy things. It is about having time to breathe before deciding. It is about not being forced into panic just because someone else created an emergency. Evelyn introduced me to a financial advisor named Karen Whitaker, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair, reading glasses on a chain, and the calm authority of someone who had told many nervous people not to buy boats. She reviewed everything with me. The trust stays invested, she said. You draw only what you need. The insurance money goes into a high-yield savings account and short-term investments until we build a full plan. We pay off your student loans immediately. All of them? All of them. I almost did not understand the sentence. I had carried those loans for 6 years. I had built my budget around them, worried over them, paid extra when I could, and felt guilty when I could not. Then Karen said we could wipe them out in one transaction. Like brushing crumbs off a table. I cried again. Karen handed me a tissue from a box she clearly kept ready for people like me. Money is emotional, she said. Anyone who says otherwise has never needed it. She also told me not to quit my job right away. That surprised me. I thought people with money were supposed to retire, travel, and become annoying on social media. I said. Karen smiled. You love nursing? Yes. Then keep nursing. Money should give you options, not erase your identity. So I stayed at Maplewood. But I switched from night shifts to days. That alone changed my life. People underestimate what sleep can do. After years of dragging myself through the world like a phone on low battery, I started waking up without feeling like my bones were negotiating with me. My patients noticed. Mrs. Patterson squinted at me one morning and said, You look less haunted. Thank you, I said. That is the nicest insult I have received all week. She patted my hand. Your mother would be glad. I had to step into the supply room for a minute after that. 3 months after the will reading, Grandma called. Marcus sold the Greenwich house, she said. I was on my lunch break, sitting in the same stairwell where I had received the call about my parents' accident. Some places collect moments whether you invite them to or not. Already, the listing moved fast. Victoria filed for divorce last week. I sat quietly. Part of me expected satisfaction to rise up. Maybe even a little smugness. Something sharp and easy, but it did not. I just felt sad. Not sorry enough to rescue him. Let us not get carried away. But sad in the way you feel when a bridge burns and you remember it once led somewhere. Is he okay? I asked. Grandma Seahill. He is living in an apartment in Bridgeport. Still working in real estate. But not at his old firm. And Victoria? Rebranding herself as a survivor of narcissistic financial abuse. I closed my eyes. Of course she is. Direct quote from her social media. Well, at least she found a way to make foreclosure photogenic. Grandma laughed, then grew quiet. You do not owe him your peace. Briana. I know. Do you? That was the thing about Grandma. She did not let me get away with sounding healed when I was only being polite. I am learning, I said. That weekend, Grandma came with me to Maple Drive. The lavender garden had survived the winter. Not all of it, but enough. Some plants were brown and brittle, but new green shoots were pushing through the soil. Mom would have loved that. She always trusted stubborn little plants more than dramatic people. She planted this the year you were born, Grandma said. I did not know that. She said lavender was for protection. She wanted good things growing around you. I stood there with my arms folded, looking at the garden, and for the first time since Mom died, I felt more grateful than angry. Inside the house, everything was quiet. Marcus had left it mostly clean, maybe from shame, Maybe because he had been too busy losing his own house to damage mine. Either way, I was thankful. Mom's recipe cards were still in the kitchen drawer. Her reading glasses were on the bedroom nightstand. Her old robe hung in the closet. In her room, I found a small photo album I had never seen before. Pictures of me, first day of school, nursing graduation, birthdays, Christmas mornings. A blurry photo of me asleep on the couch after a double shift, still wearing my badge. On the first page, in Mom's handwriting, she had written, "For my bravest girl." That was when I finally cried the right kind of tears. Not the wet grass tears. Not the funeral tears. Not the law office tears. These were the tears that come when you realize you were loved better than you knew. 6 months later, I enrolled in a nurse practitioner program. I had wanted to do it for years, but tuition had always looked like a wall too high to climb. This time, I filled out the forms without feeling that old panic in my chest. I kept working part-time at Maplewood, because I was not ready to leave the people who had become part of my life. I rented the house on Maple Drive to a young family. The wife was a nurse from Maplewood. Her husband taught middle school, and they had 2 little girls with matching rain boots. The older one asked if she could help take care of the lavender. I said yes, that felt right. A house that had held so much pain deserved children laughing in the hallway and someone small learning how to water plants without drowning them. As for Marcus, I did not cut him off forever, but I did set rules. Any contact went through email. No surprise visits. No money requests. No guilt speeches dressed up as family concern. He wrote once. Months later, not a real apology. Not yet. He said he had been under pressure. He said he had made mistakes. He said he hoped we could talk someday. I answered with one paragraph. I still love you, Marcus. But I will no longer pay for your mistakes. If you want a relationship with me, it has to begin with honesty, respect, and a real apology. Until then, I wish you well from a distance. That distance saved me, and that is the part I want you to hear. Especially if you are watching this with a long family history sitting heavy on your shoulders. You can love people and still refuse to be used by them. You can forgive someone in your heart and still keep your door locked. You can be kind without being available for every crisis they create. For years, I thought being a good daughter, a good sister, a good woman meant making myself smaller so everyone else could feel comfortable. I thought peace meant silence. I thought loyalty meant staying, even when staying cost me pieces of myself. My mother taught me something different. She taught me that protection is love. Boundaries are love too. And sometimes the most loving thing a person can do is prepare you for the day when they will not be there to stand between you and the people who mistake your kindness for weakness. I still wear Mom's Timex watch most days. Not because it is expensive. It is not. The leather band is cracked, and the face is scratched. But it still works. Just like she said, why replace what is faithful? And on my right hand, I wear Grandma's sapphire ring. Not to show off. I work with older patients. Remember? Half of them are more impressed by a good cardigan than jewelry. I wear it to remember the women who came before me. Women who survived quietly, planned carefully, loved deeply, and finally, in their own ways, said enough. I did not become rich because my mother died. I became free because my mother saw the truth and refused to leave me defenseless. That is a very different inheritance. The money helped. Yes, I would be foolish to pretend it did not. It paid my loans. It opened doors. It gave me choices. But the real gift was this. I stopped begging for a place in a family system built to keep me at the bottom. I stopped confusing being needed with being loved. I stopped making myself useful to people who had no intention of being grateful. And I finally understood what Mom meant when she said I had done everything right. Showing up mattered, but leaving mattered too. So if your family has made you feel small, if someone has told you that tradition, age, gender, money, or obligation gives them the right to treat you badly, please hear me clearly. They are wrong. Love does not require you to disappear. Family does not mean surrendering your dignity. And forgiveness does not mean handing the same people another chance to hurt you in the same old way. My brother thought locking me out would prove the house was his. Instead, it showed me the truth. The house was never the real inheritance. The real inheritance was my mother's final lesson. Do not wait for people who benefit from your silence to give you permission to speak. Open the door yourself. And if they change the locks, call a locksmith. The greatest lesson in this story is that love should never require you to erase yourself. Family can be a blessing, but family can also become a place where people excuse selfishness, entitlement, and disrespect simply because that is how it has always been. Age, tradition, money, or blood ties do not give anyone the right to treat you like a servant, a burden, or a backup plan. For older viewers, this message matters deeply. Many parents and grandparents spend their lives giving, forgiving, helping, and staying quiet to keep the peace. But peace that depends on your silence is not real peace. It is only delayed pain. True love includes respect. True family shows up when you are weak, not only when there is something to inherit. This story reminds us to protect our dignity, our home, our savings, and our peace while we still can. Put important wishes in writing. Talk to trusted professionals. Do not let guilt push you into signing away your rights or funding someone else's bad choices. Forgiveness is noble, but boundaries are necessary. You can love someone from a distance. You can be kind without being used. And sometimes, saying no is not revenge. It is finally choosing yourself.